Welcome to the life of a rancher during calving season. In the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you what a rancher goes through during calving season. First, the rancher usually brings the cows closer to home about 3 weeks before they calve. There are many reasons why the rancher brings the cows closer to home. First, so they can check them regularly during the night. Also, if the cow is having problems, they can bring the cow to the house a lot easier. There are many problems a cow can have while calving, but before I get to that, Christen, a vet at Stockman's Veterinary Clinic, told me how many stages there are while a cow is calving.
There's 3 different stages of calving. There's part 1 where it's the cervix is dilating, and it ends when the placenta is broke and the fetal membranes come out. And then the second phase of labor is when the calf comes out, and the third phase is when the placenta comes out.
A rancher looks for many signals that tell them that the cow is calving. Richard told me a couple of those signals.
Most of the time you can tell because there's something passing out the back end, whether it be some placenta or fluid or blood.
There are also many types of problems a cow can have while they're calving. How can you tell if a cow is having problems? Twin Pine Ranch owner Paul Christen told me what to do if you think a cow is having problems.
Mostly just watch them, and if they act different, they're constantly getting up, if they're nervous, if there's blood, usually blood means trouble. So many things that do it, but just watch them, and if they are not progressing constantly, then there's usually something wrong and you need to help them.
One of the many problems a cow can have while she's calving is if the calf is coming out backwards. Richard told me how you can tell if the calf is backwards.
You can tell if the calf's coming out backwards from a distance by how the feet are coming out. If the bottoms of the feet are face down, then generally that means that the feet are forwards. But it could be that the calf's upside down and backwards, and so then the feet would look like their front feet. When you go inside, you can tell, because if you can't feel a tail or a head, you can tell by the feet, because the number of joints on the front feet are different than the number of joints on the back feet.
Richard also says why a backwards calf is a lot more serious than a forward one.
Because you can't waste time as much, because the pressure on the umbilical cord happens while the calf's lungs and head are still in the cow where he can't breathe. When the calf's coming forward, his head's out about the time when the umbilical cord is compressed or broken. If he's coming backwards, his umbilical cord is compressed about when his tail's coming out, and so you have to get, because he'll start to get the signals to breathe, because he doesn't have any blood from his mother through the umbilical cord within a minute or two. So you need to get him out and able to breathe fresh air in a couple minutes from the time that his tail's starting to come out.
Richard also told me what you can do if a calf is too big to come out of the cow regularly.
We actually do C-sections pretty regularly. We do them standing. We do an epidural block, and then we locally block the side and make an incision through the side while the cow is standing and restrained. And it generally takes, on a simple C-section, it generally takes 45 minutes from when the cow's in the chute till we're letting her out.
After the calf is born and a couple of days old, Paul tells me what he likes to see from the cow and calf.
Mainly just make sure the cow claims the calf, and they connect and become one. They claim each other, and we just watch them to make sure they don't get pneumonia, scours, dehydrated, stepped on. You just watch them, hopefully get them out in a big enough area where they're not around anything.
After a couple more weeks, the pair is usually sent out to pasture, but that doesn't mean the rancher doesn't check on them as much. The rancher usually checks on the pair every 2 days just to make sure they don't get sick. Sadly, some of the calves do get sick. Richard told me what the most common kind of sickness the calves can have, what to look for if the calf is sick, and how the rancher can make the calf feel better.
A lot of times the most common diseases we have in that age of calves, 2 weeks old calves, is diarrhea. There's many different causes. There's viruses and bacteria and other single-celled organisms that cause diarrhea. The most common sign is besides the watery stool, is this calf will be lethargic, down, won't want to get up, pretty slow moving. He could have his ears down. Generally, the ranchers try and treat with oral electrolytes and fluids, and if they just can't keep ahead of it, then we have to IV them fluids, and generally we can get them around in 24 hours and get them sent home in 24 hours on IV fluids. Calves can also get respiratory disease, pneumonia, and upper respiratory tract infections at that age. We just generally see them as their ears are down, their heads extended, having trouble breathing. We treat them mostly with antibiotics. And then other congenital diseases aren't very common, but if there's an umbilical hernia, you can pretty much, the main complaint about that is within 3 days to 3 weeks, their umbilical area isn't shrinking up like it's supposed to, and generally we can see a hernia there.
A month down the road, the ranchers usually have what is called a branding. Richard told me what the ranchers usually do at the branding.
It varies from ranch to ranch. Obviously they do the branding to prevent people from stealing cattle. Most guys are castrating them at that age. If they have horned animals, they're dehorning them. They're usually giving them a 7-way vaccine, which is a clostridial vaccine which prevents several diseases, including blackleg and enterotoxemia. But some people also do a pneumonia vaccine, which covers some viruses and bacteria. And a lot of people will do hormone injections to promote growth, efficiency, and that's generally about all they'll do.
There are many types of shots the ranchers can give the calves during the branding. Paul listed a few of those shots.
Sometimes we give it a 7-way, with Haemophilus, Ultrabac 7, Vision 7, Vision 8, I think, Pilgard, Pink Eye.
Most people don't know why the ranchers brand them, so I asked Paul, and this is what he told me.
For identification, so when we take them to our pastures that are sometimes 8 miles, sometimes 20 miles, sometimes 60 miles from our place, we have a little more chance of them, nobody stealing them. And if they do steal them, then when they take them someplace to sell them, they have to inspect them to make sure that they have that brand, and so it's a way to identify them so they don't get stolen.
After the branding, the cows and calves are kept in pastures closer to home for about 2 more months. After those 2 months, the ranchers pair the cows and calves up and move them to a pasture further away from the house for the summer. After the summer is over, the cows and calves are moved back and weaned. If you don't know what weaning is when you separate the cows and calves from each other. After they wean the calves, the ranchers sort the heifers and steers from each other and feed them separately in the winter. During the winter months, the steers are sold, and after the winter months, the heifers are sorted and bred. So that's what a rancher goes through during calving season. As you can see, it is not as easy as you might think. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of late nights. I hope you now know more about what ranchers go through during calving season.